Up next on my tiny bench is this Sony professional compact disc player, CDP 2700. It comes to us with reports of the open close button not working, and when the drawer is forced open and forced closed, it just whirs and does not play. As you can see, though, it's a stout unit, quite a handsome face on it, I have to say. And we'll be taking it apart to get a sense of what's going on with it. Since I don't really know much about the unit, I'll take the cover off before I power it on. Up next, we'll take a quick look at the back. Back looking at the Sony CDP 2700. Obviously, this is the back of the unit, and this shows us that this particular unit is from December of 1995, and it does have XLR outputs, balanced outputs, which is kind of unusual for December of 95. That's more, I think, a factor of it being a professional unit rather than intended to be a home unit. XLR for home units obviously came into play a lot later. It also has nice digital out, so we'll have to see how, after we get it fixed, how the internal DAC produces sound, and if that's something we want to go with, or if we just want to use either of these digital outs and run to an outboard DAC. But as I said, quite a handsome unit. Voltage is selectable. Also, you can select if you want the AES or the unbalanced digital out. And then it has two sets of line outs, both the XLR and these nice gold-plated RCAs. And then it has a monitor out. Noticed on the front there's a monitor volume switch or volume control. So we'll have to play with that ultimately after we get her up and running. I do like that it doesn't have the captive power cord. It's got an AEC. Just seems like it's modern touch. Not sure what's behind this plate or what might have been here originally, why it wouldn't be just regular chassis. Maybe that will reveal itself as well. And there's this nice chart showing how the external remote functions and whether you want to use mode 1 or mode 2. And I'm sure that's a factor of or relevant to what other Sony products it plays with. They probably had a set for professional and then a set for home use, but I'm sure we won't really spend a whole lot of time with that. You see that it is made in Japan, and back when Japanese were making some really wonderful things. So I'm anxious to see what this looks like inside, and that'll be up next. Back for a quick overhead view. The Sony CDP 2700 from 1995. You can see it's super clean inside. Looks like largely Elna. And those might be some Panasonics as well. Copper heat sinks on the regulators. I think we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think 6 regulators on the top side of the board. All through-hole technology. Near as I can tell. Mechanism looks pretty clean. Nothing that's obviously broken, burnt, blown up. Certainly doesn't look like it was ever abused. I mean, she's super clean. maybe next we'll make sure that our voltage select is 120 for here in the States, and then throw some power into her, see how she does. Sony's really good about marking their boards. You'll even notice they point where the screws go. Generally, what I've noticed on consumer grade CD players, when they have an arrow pointing where the screw goes, that's because that screw also makes a ground connection on the backside. I'm not really sure if that's true with these commercial units or not, but I always found Sony to be top-notch about both marking the board, and then on the schematic they will take random spots and generally show what the what the signal should be there. I'm noticing also two variable resistors and I think an inductor back here. So I would have suspected they would have been closer to the mech if they are for setting tracking and focus and stuff along those lines. We'll have to dig into it more. But like I said, for now, I really just wanted to show what the unit looked like. I mean, not a bit of dirt, not even dust inside. It's just amazing to me. On the bench, we get some stuff that's just caked in dirt, and we spend the first day cleaning. That's not going to be required here. You notice it even uses an input noise filter. Really just signs of top-notch construction. More later from my tiny bench. Back on my tiny bench with the Sony CDP 2700 professional CD player. I took the mechanism out since the last video, and I did find the belt was broken like we suspected. Replaced the belt and just now put in a disc just to show you how it operates. Pretty smooth. Put in a disc of royalty-free music and spinning up quickly enough. Let's see if it plays. Royalty-free, because royalty-free music is the best. I don't have the operator's manual, but I think the way this works is if you want to play a particular track like 4, you would say continue 4. Oh yeah, that spins up fast. I don't remember how many tracks are on here. Continue 7. Boy, that's almost instantaneous. I was originally thinking I was going to replace the laser, but I think I'll take it in the house and play the unit for a while. Maybe replacing the laser won't be necessary. More later. Thank you. Well, we're still on this Sony CDP 2700 on my tiny bench. And I wanted to take a moment and talk a little bit about changing the belt and the mechanism. Hopefully this can serve as a guide so anyone watching this that needs to change the belt on one of these units won't make the same dumb mistakes that I made. So obviously this is the section dealing with the mechanism itself. What you'll find when you take the top off of the unit is there are corner screws on this plate that you'll undo, and that will allow the whole unit to be removed. There are 2 cables that should be disconnected, and it's easier to disconnect them from the board, the main board itself, and leave them on this unit. One is one of the flex flat cables, so that's certainly something to be very careful with. Those things are pretty vulnerable. So
My recommendation is just use 2 hands to install it back in. Put, between your thumb and forefinger on each side and just press it down firmly, but make sure it's lined up before you put any pressure at all. After you then have this unit where it'll remove, and it'll come out, you move it backwards and then lift it up. You will have to take the front panel, not front panel, but the CD tray cover, you'll take that off, and that's in place by just 2 Allen screws and comes right off. Then the whole unit will slide back and you just lift it up and then put it on a table somewhere. Then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to undo a screw here and one on the other side, and then if you apply pressure outward there and there, this will come off of this tray. That'll free the tray up somewhat. You can see there's a rod here that runs through the base of the tray. That is also secured here. You can probably see the little hole there. That's secured here. So at this point, instead of pulling this whole tray off of the unit, it will more pivot. It will rock up, and that will allow access to the area where the belt is. Once you've got that in place, then you'll see the belts and the gears and the pulleys. And bear with me one second. Got a picture here somewhere I wanted to use to illustrate something. There we go. This is more or less what it will look like after you have it rocked up. Of course, you'll have the tray kind of here in the way, but you'll still have access to this. There's also a little C-clamp on this pulley. That does not need to be removed. That was one of my mistakes. I pulled that off thinking that was going to impede my ability to replace the belt. I did that early in the process and almost lost it 2 or 3 times, but ultimately found it and later was able to secure it. But after you're at this point, I'm presuming you've either got a stretched out belt or a broken belt. This gear simply lifts off, then this gear lifts off. I recommend taking a quick picture so that you'll get it back in this order when you're ready to put it back. But once you have these 2 gears off, you get full access. There's nothing stopping you from removing the old belt and putting the new belt on. And then simply put these gears back and just reassemble the unit. It's much easier than I thought it was going to be. And like I said, there is a C-clamp here that there's no reason in the world to remove it. And that should make it a lot easier for anyone looking to replace the belts on the Sony CDP 2500. So more later.
Back on my tiny bench with the CDP 2700 by Sony. I use this test disc. In particular, I like to listen to the tracks. They're test tracks, and they've got gouges on them intentionally to see how far out of standard the CD player can play. And it's said that every CD player should be able to play 0.2 millimeter gaps. By gap, I mean an actual physical gap. You can probably see some of the large blemishes here. Those are intentional on this disc for that very purpose. So let's start at 25. And I got 2, 3, 4, 5. So it plays 25 fine. 26, 27. I'll just let that play for a second. Obviously, these are just test tones, so no violation. But I do highly recommend this disc. So 27 obviously plays fine. 28, this is 0.3 millimeter. 27 was the 0.2 millimeter. And again, that's the industry standard. So 28, we're starting to get above what's standard. 29, that's 0.5 millimeter, about 2.5 times wider gap than the standard. 30, that's 0.75 millimeter. That's almost 4 times. Here's a 31. This is a full millimeter. Seems to be playing all right. 32, millimeter and a quarter. There, click. And obviously when it starts to make that ticking noise, you don't want it to continue. That can cause problems. But it seems to play through 31, which is a 1 millimeter gap. So looks like a pretty solid unit. I think we're just going to package it up and put it in the system and enjoy it for a little while. I don't think it's going to need a new mechanism at all. I mean, a new laser at all. So more later. Back on my tiny bench with the Sony CDP 2700. Just wanted to do a quick, if I can get you guys straight. Just wanted to do a quick frequency response overview. Nothing too scientific, but what we'll do is we'll play various test tones from this test CD, and we'll use these cursors as our reference. We'll start with a 1K test tone, and I've got a speaker playing in the background. Some of these tones we'll be able to hear. My little garage speakers aren't sufficient to hear down too low or up too high, but we'll give it a shot. So here come the 1K reference tone. Looks like we're a little low there. Okay, so about what, 20 volts peak to peak to 1K. And now I'll take it down to 40 hertz. That looks pretty good. Still pretty flat. Up to 100. Looks pretty flat. Now here comes 315. Back to our 1K, we'll just go through it. Next will be a 3.15K, which, let me tell you, in the room is a piercing sound. Looks like we got a little bump there. Really nothing to speak of. Next we'll go to 6.3K. I can't tell if that's off a little or if that's just my scope, but generally pretty flat, as you can tell from looking at the sine wave. 10K, pretty true. 16K, kind of easier to tell where the cursors are if you stretch the sine wave out a little bit. That looks pretty tight. Try 20K. Yeah, that's 20. And
That's really as high as it goes on this disc, but as you can see, the frequency response of this Sony CDP 2700, as measured by the human eye and using this diagnostic test CD, looks to be pretty true. More later. Just one last quick measurement from my tiny bench regarding the Sony CDP 2700. This is our 1K test tone. And here's our fundamental. You see our drop off. The harmonics are down 52 dB or so. So some of that could be just noise floor on the scope as well, but pretty clean signal, and as you can tell there. More later. Thought I'd do one final playthrough of the Sony CDP 2700 here on my tiny bench. Really impressed with this unit. The looks are starting to grow on me too. It sort of has a, I don't know, more of a military look than an industrial look, I think. But has some good weight to it. Well-made machine, near as I can tell. I'll be putting it in the home system for a little while just to thoroughly test it before I move it on to its new owner. But let's just do a quick playthrough on some of the wonderful royalty-free music. It spins up fast. Like, that's almost instantaneous. So nice. Just real good sound. And that's it from my tiny bench look at the CDP 2700 Sony professional CD player. Thanks again. Catch you next time.